Hello, everyone. Welcome to SLOconf. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to Noble9 for organizing a wonderful service level objective conference. For those of you who are excited about reliability, I think this is the place to be. So let's get started. Today's talk is really about measuring service reliability for greater user experience, from theory to practice. Just take a moment and ask this question: how is reliability-related work activity prioritized against new features in your backlog prioritization process within your team? Just take a moment because it all comes down to culture. What's your culture, and with respect to thinking about reliability and walking the talk, and then able to implement the practices. Who am I? I'm Rama Kulasekaran. I'm a developer and a reliability advocate. I love to travel, network, and speak at engineering conferences and meetups. I'm very passionate about early career programs and DEI initiatives. Why me? Why am I here? I am on an SLO journey myself, right? And I've implemented latency SLO, within my teams, and continuously learning. One of the things what I have done since last year, doing a lot of research and learning, from going through the Google SRE book with myself and with along with my engineering teams, going through Alex's book, digging into the SRE con, the last few years of videos, hearing how others are doing, right? Industry experts are doing service reliability engineering and SLO specifically. And then last year, the first year conference on SLO specifically. So that was pretty exciting. So if you're really into reliability, this is a treat. So definitely, I'm glad that you are, listening to this. Why are you here? Well, you are either new to SLO, or you are in the middle of the SLO journey, or you want to learn at least one new thing, right? That's my assumption. So here we go. Agenda-wise, we are going to talk about SLO basics, right? Getting the the common language down, and then talk about why we measure the right level of reliability, and how do you decide what to measure, and how do you get started. 3 and 4 are they're tied to each other, which we'll talk in a moment. And then a few SLO facts. Service. Before we talk about service level indicators and service level objective, I really think we should really talk about service and service level. Service is really you can look at it as a feature of a platform that is provided to external end users, to customers, to do whatever that's going to meet the customer expectations, right? It's either a front end, back end, whatever it may be. Service level, right? It measures the performance, right? What level it's performing, right? I think that's what it really is. And service level really applies to any system, right, that has a user. Service level indicator is a quantitative measurement to measure the health and the level of the service provided to your customers, right? Availability, latency, two common ones, and there are others. So that's what SLI really is all about. Service level objective. Now, it is an objective target that we set against SLI, right? Just a simple way to look at it, right? Yeah, a goal or a target for how service should work is another way to look at it, right? It's a user happiness is one way to actually remember service level objective. If you met the objective, then the users are happy, You may have heard this. You may have read in books. Now, if you double click on the SLO, okay, what is it, right? What are some components? How do you want to really look at SLO? Well, you really should be thinking at it from the high level. There are two components, right? One is the organizational component. That's where the stakeholders and the engineers come together and align. Okay. The second is the technical component, right? Think of take an architecture, a microservice architecture or a basic architecture. Even if you look at an illustration I have here, an external application or end user making a REST call, to a backend system and returning a request response, right? It's a very simple, like a 20,000 feet, a view, right? So now you have to really start thinking about how are you going to actually scrape the metrics, and then making sure that you are looking at how many services, what percentage of services actually didn't meet, and what percentage of services didn't respond within certain milliseconds. All of that are the technical components of SLO. And we are talking about that. So why measure the right level of reliability, right? The service level objective is all about measuring the right level of reliability, not to gold plate anything, right? So you know where you are against the end user commitment. That's number one. You could prevent war room firefighting mode, right? If you monitor, right, on a 30-day rolling window, if you measure, you know exactly where you are, right? You can't just get the service up and running and forget about it and move on to the next service. You want to keep monitoring this and making sure that you can set an alert, so that if it is trending in a positive direction or negative, right? If it's so that at least you can go and say, yeah, we need to go take a look at this. It's trending downwards, and it could turn into a war room mode that you can prevent. You could have a data-driven trade-off conversation with stakeholders, right? Reliability versus new features based on this data-driven conversation, right? And instead of intuitive-based decisions. And then very critical, right? Our engineers, as they are, we are putting them on page duty and alerts and all of that. This absolutely will reduce burnout of alert fatigue, right? Into a more reasonable alert, right? We are not just alerting for everything, but making sure that there is a reasonable alert for engineers, so that we are leveraging their time wisely, because engineering time is precious. How do you decide what to measure and get started? Well, you have a bunch of services, you have a bunch of user community, right? If you really want to look at it from that angle, you first identify the user community. You have let's say that you have 10 of them as an example, and then you identify all the services used by this community, and then based on the pain points or the criticality of the service, you prioritize, right? Which one do you want to go and do set SLOs? And then you understand the workflows, right? Making sure that all your observabilities are in order. And then choose the SLI, right, to measure the journey. And you can decide which one you want to pick. For this example, I would say, the customer is concerned about latency so much, so let's pick the latency SLI type, and then establish the SLOs, right? The target and alerts, and making sure that your service is running the way it's supposed to run. Now, if you really look at it, how do you view this, right? In terms of on a high level, to remember, you have users, you have a prioritized service, service X, and the user cares about low latency response. They cares about more performance, the most. You pick the latency SLI, and then you, from the SLO perspective, what proportion of the time you want that to be true? Request response less than 40 milliseconds, 90%. That's your SLO, right? So you can continue to measure in a way that you have alerts in place, and so that at any given time you can open up your dashboard, take a look at it, or you can actually have your alerts sent out. One thing to note is not all values make good SLIs. Okay, CPU is running hot. Why does the user care about that, right? Memories and disk, it still matters, from platform engineering perspective, but users don't care. So you want to minimize investing too much time on building SLOs based on that. Now, there are some facts that I wanted to share. I really like this quote. You can only fight the way you practice. So it's all about learning from experience and keep learning, right? So few key things I wanted to call out is SLOs are retrospective. It's not predictive, right? So you follow all the engineering principles. You stand up, you implement your service. Great. Now you actually going, as I mentioned earlier, on a 30-day rolling window, you're looking at the performance, right? What percentage, is all of the request response, is it less than 40 milliseconds happening 90%, or is it actually 70%, right? So it's retrospective. And you also need to reevaluate your SLIs and SLOs as your ecosystem evolves. Upstream, changes could happen. So you have to figure out what does make more sense. Like whatever we said 90%, is it still going to be valid? Or do we really have to actually adjust it to 85% or whatever maybe? But end of the day, it has to meet the end user goals. Learn from incidents. And this may sound very basic, but this is very powerful, right? You cannot just go by your SLO metric and say that's a be all end all. It is really not. SLO provides great insights, but that doesn't tell the full story. So learning from incidents is extremely important. So make sure that whatever you're learning from that, you apply those learnings, back into your full incident process and alerts. Failure is unavoidable, so how you respond is very important. And that's even though it's very basic and common, it's absolutely critical. There's no 100% bulletproof anywhere. So as long as you are able to actually respond quick and able to restore, your service is the best way to go. And this one, nines don't matter if users aren't happy. This is so critical, right? We can go and just go crazy on all the SLOs and do all the metrics, which is absolutely important. But you have to ensure that you are measuring against end user business objective. So that's a key. Now, so today, what all we saw so far: SLO basics, measuring reliability, how do you get started, and there are some few facts. So I just wanted to call out that the culture of reliability is a broader topic, and there are many systems and upstream, downstream, a lot of dependencies are there. You think about white box monitoring, black box monitoring, and all of that comes into picture. So do your very best to, incrementally get better at observability across the board, because you can't really solve all on same day. So start with the SLO, and then keep maturing on your observability journey, and then you'll be in good place. What else? Well, teamwork and collaboration are key, right? Regardless of you're working in an agile team, working with your product teams, your stakeholders, doesn't matter, right? Teamwork and collaboration are key. Continue to keep that tight business alignment going. So good luck with your SLO journey. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or I've also find me my email in the earlier slides. So looking forward to collaborate and learn from we can learn from each other. So thank you.